Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, friends, based on geography you're in. Welcome to the Q1 FY22 earnings call of eClerx Services Limited. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. The transcript of the webinar will be made available in a week's time from the call. Joining you today to give an update about the quarter gone by and answer your questions, we have with us the top management of eClerx, P.D. Mundra, co-founder and executive director, Anjan Malik, co-founder and director, and Rohitash Gupta, chief financial officer. I will hand over the conference to Rohitash. He will make his opening remarks and then we'll move to the Q&A. As far as the Q&A is concerned, the standard rules follow. You put your hand up and we'll let you into the queue. Before we start, I'd like to remind you that anything that is mentioned in the call, which gives any outlook for the future or which can be construed as a forward-looking statement, must be viewed in conjunction with the risks and uncertainties that we face. These risks and uncertainties are included but not limited to what we mentioned in the prospectus file SEBI and subsequent annual reports, which you can find on our website. With that said, I'll now hand over the floor to Rohitash. Over to you, Rohitash.
Thank you, Devakar. Very good evening and welcome to the eClerx Q1 FY22 earnings call for the quarter ended on 30th June of 2021. Our operating revenue in the quarter was USD 64.7 million, which is sequentially up by 1.4% in USD terms and 1.2% in constant currency terms. This quarter's total revenue was INR 4,944 million, which is up 3.7% sequentially and up 42% on YOY basis. Our net profit for this quarter was INR 913 million. All the absolute margin metrics this quarter were up by much more than corresponding revenue increase in YOY basis due to inclusion of Personiv and last Q1 being severely impacted by COVID. However, we saw sequential decrease in profitability this quarter because of wage hikes, hiring for ongoing ramp-ups, and one-off Personiv acquisition accounting related true-ups. The one-off acquisition costs are shown as other expenses in our press release financials and are considered below the EBIT line in our investor deck and investor sheet. Further, we expect to do Personiv acquisition earn-out related true-ups at each future balance sheet date and reflect that appropriately in corresponding profit and loss statement. We had cash balance of INR 7,268 million at Q1 end, which has increased since the last quarter. The net cash flow reduction in this quarter versus previous quarter was due to the working capital changes related to relatively higher FY21 bonuses, which were subsequently paid during this quarter. The capex is likely to remain volatile with expected increase in depreciation due to the new assets taken to support the ongoing headcount increase. Most of the key business metrics now include Personiv and have reached steady state after the full integration. Our DSOs have improved since the inclusion of Personiv and overall collection performance remains very good. On the people side, we continue to work from home for 90% plus of our staff and have been able to get 76% of our India staff and some of their family members vaccinated with at least one dose. Overall demand environment and Personiv's revenue trajectory have remained encouraging in the last few quarters. Finally, board has recommended a buyback of INR 303 crores at a maximum price of INR 3200 subject to regulatory and shareholders approval. With this, Devakar, you can proceed for the Q&A.
Thank you, Rohitash. If anyone has a question, you can please raise your hand at the bottom of the screen and then we'll open you up. The first question comes from the line of Manik Taneja from JM Financial. Manik, please go ahead.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yep.
So just wanted to get your thoughts around the business outlook across the business segments for us, and also some sense as to how we should be looking at the significant offshore employee addition that we have done in the current quarter. Thank you.
PD?
Yeah. Hi, Manik. I think in terms of outlook, we would say the demand environment continues to look encouraging, and that is also reflected in some of the hiring we've done. So the hiring increase is on two accounts. One is, to cater to some of the late stage discussions that we have and the ongoing ramps we have. And the other is, to also give us some provision to handle any increase in attrition, just sort of given tightening conditions in the labor market. So those are the two key reasons which are driving the increase in hiring and the employee additions offshore over the last 3 months. Demand environment, I think continues to be encouraging.
PD and segment-wise color.
Segment-wise, Manik, I would say that sort of tends to rotate quarter on quarter. So, I think last year was particularly strong for our digital business and for our customer ops business. More recently, we've seen more traction on the financial market side. Personav has been, reasonably steady for the entire period that they've been part of the eClerx family. So I would say there's rotation across our 3 or 4 businesses, and frankly, over a, let's say, forward 4 to 6 quarter period, it's hard to predict today which business would be the fastest growing.
Thank you. So just wanted to get a confirmation that, like when we've spoken in the recent past after your 4Q numbers, you suggested that the situation for us essentially is much better than what it has been in the last few years in terms of some of the struggle at top customers, some of the insourcing related challenge. So that very much holds true, and you continue to foresee an environment of organic growth continuing for us going forward.
Yeah, I think so. At least for the visibility that we have right now, I would say that's certainly true. And remember, you have to keep in mind, as we are painfully aware, that for the last 4 or 5 years, for the last 4 years, we've been flat in revenues. So compared to that, I think certainly the future looks substantially stronger.
And would it be possible to call out the contribution of Personav in the current quarter's revenue?
Yeah, so Manik, I think at the time we bought them, we disclosed that they were about $30 million, give or take, in revenues. So, and that is a fairly recent data point because, we closed that deal only in the end of December. So that should give you some reasonable sense of what that split is.
Oh, thank you and all the best for the future.
Thanks, Manik.
Thank you very much, Manik. The next question comes to the line of Sandeep Shah from Equirus. Sandeep, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, Sandeep, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. Just wanted to understand whether the growth of 1.4% in this quarter was in line with the management expectation. Because it's slightly lower versus last few quarters organic growth, which we are showing in the numbers as a whole. And versus our comments that the ramp down in the business, like FY21 is likely to be lower in FY22. So is it 1Q has panned out as per what your expectation was?
So Sandeep, hi. PD, you want to go ahead?
No, Rohidash, why don't you lead, and then if you want, I can add.
So Sandeep, that's a good observation, but if you recall from our past calls, PD has mentioned several times that our revenue trajectory in positive environment will remain to be volatile quarter on quarter. And just like he said, in some quarters, some vertical will show higher momentum and higher revenue growth, and in some quarters, some others. And there will be large deal impacts in making some quarters look better than others. So in that context, if you see our last 3-4 quarters as a whole and average it out, I think it has been very much in our expectation, or rather more than our expectation, especially coming out of COVID. But yeah, quarter on quarter, there will be volatility.
Okay. And Rohidash, just on margins, just wanted to understand, last time we said the range of 28 to 32% at EBITDA level may continue. So do you still stick to that, or how is it? And why Personav acquisition deal closed in last quarter? Why these acquisition related costs are now coming in this quarter as a whole?
Yeah, so first let me answer why it came in this quarter, and then we can talk about some future treatments also that will happen as per accounting standards. So basically, as part of the deal structure, there were certain months provided to close out the net working capital, which was done on estimated basis at the time of closing. So basically, there were several procedures required, and we took slightly more time than what we expected initially to close them out. So ideally, it should have been closed by Q4 last quarter, but it took little more time, had a spillover. So yeah, we closed that out in Q1, and that's why we are accounting it in Q1. Now, as per the accounting standards, we have done our purchase price allocation as well as which requires estimation of deal value, including the earnouts, right, which are up to next 2 years. So we have done that during Q4 itself, and those are based on estimates prevailing at that time. Now, as the industry outlook remains positive to our commentary also, and whatever you will be hearing elsewhere, we think that there is a possibility that our estimates may turn out to be, earnout estimates may turn out to be conservative in the sense that business may do little more better than what we estimated way back in December or January. So if that happens, then we are supposed to do fair value estimation, re-estimation of those earlier earnout estimates as done in Q4, again at each subsequent balance sheet date. So those balance sheet dates will be September and March, and this will and this doesn't mean that there will be a P&L charge positive or negative necessarily. We will do the evaluation. If the delta is material, then it will show up in the P&L.
But this should be routed through balance sheet, right? Why P&L? Because this may be accounted through goodwill or intangibles if performance is higher than what we anticipate.
So we did the purchase price allocation, which includes the goodwill, and that's logged as of Q4. We cannot change it because the financial year has closed. So now, earnout being a long-term liability, as per accounting standards, we have to fair value them at each balance sheet date. And based on the materiality, we will pass it through P&L if there is a plus or minus.
And your comment on margin, and I have a follow-up may come in a second time.
Yeah, Sandeep, after this, maybe you can come into the queue, please.
Yeah.
The next question.
Sorry, I think there was one question outstanding, Divakar, on the margins. He was asking about the guidance on the 28 to 32% range. Rohitash, if you just want to respond to that.
Yeah, so basically excluding Personav related, which are unpredictable at this time, I think that range is a very, very reasonable range for near term.
Okay, I will come in a follow-up. Thanks.
Sorry about that, Sandeep. The next question is from the line of Hitesh Arora. Hitesh, your line has been unmuted. Please go ahead. You need to unmute yourself, Hitesh.
Sorry. So if I understand correctly, Personav revenue is around $8.7 million for the quarter. Would that understanding be correct?
Hi, Hitesh. So what we have mentioned earlier that we have acquired the business roughly at slightly below 30 million mark, and in last quarter annualized mark, and in last quarter we mentioned in our call and interaction that it has crossed 30 million annualized. So by that logic, at that point of time it crossed 7.5 million a quarter, and Q1 is slightly better than Q4 mark for them.
Did you disclose for last quarter what was the Personav's revenue number?
No, we don't disclose segmental revenues.
Okay. Okay. And if you have any commentary on historically, it's been the revenue fall off from existing projects maturing was similar to new deals being added, and hence you were at roughly the same run rate over the last 4-5 years. But that seemed to have changed last quarter. So what is the visibility on on revenues from existing clients continuing, i.e. not falling off a cliff sharply? Any visibility there?
So Hitesh, I think there are two types of events if you are talking about last 4 or 5 years. One is basically large client level roll-off, and the second one is regular end of projects or expected roll-offs from the at a project level. Now the large client roll-offs, we have no visibility at this point of time, which is a positive thing. And however, regular roll-offs at project level do keep happening. Having said that, what we have seen for last 3-4 quarters, especially since October onwards of last year, that the amount of new sales we are adding is substantially higher than the amount of regular leakage that we are seeing. And we are even at this point, we are seeing similar trend. And that's why the overall net demand environment looks positive for us.
If I can ask one last question. So you said financial services is doing better for you this quarter. So can you be a little more specific? Where is that? Which subsegment of that? If you could get a little more color there.
Anjan, why don't you take that?
Where is the growth specifically coming from in that segment, if you could?
Anjani, muted, please.
Yeah, sorry, apologies. Could you repeat that question? I lost you.
No, I was just saying, I understand that financial services is doing better for you this quarter. So if you could give a little more details, which part of that specific business is doing well, or are you, you've got more clients in that space or more banks that you've onboarded? If you could give us more color.
I think I wouldn't say it's doing better or worse. I think if you look at all of our last year, I would say financial services is very stable with a sort of upward trajectory. And I'd say that that's continued. I think, we saw demand increase towards the second half of last year. Some of that got booked in the first quarter of this year. So that would reflect in sort of the higher numbers that we're seeing. So I don't think that there's been a dramatic change in sentiment. I think what has changed, however, in general, is that a lot of our banking clients have large captives set up in India and other low-cost jurisdictions. I think there's generally been a shortage of talent for them, both in those local markets and also, obviously, in their home markets because of various government initiatives such as furloughs, which has broadly meant a larger demand for third-party services. I think that's been the one thing that we've noticed over the last 9 months that has been a tailwind. But I'd say that's a small but a positive small effect. Broadly, I'd say the business has been on a modest upward trajectory for about now 12 months.
Understood. I'll come back in the queue. Thanks.
Thanks much, Hitesh. The next question comes from the line of Ashish Agarwal. Ashish, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Congratulations on a good set of numbers. So I had a couple of quick small observations and queries. One, sir, I see your seat count has come down sequentially from about 11,273 to 11,039, where we have seen a headcount actually go up. How should I be reading this data point?
Yeah. Hi, Ashish. So this is a very, very small change, and this happens when we do either rationalization in some area to carve out a special space for a particular client or otherwise. And time to time, we also review our lease portfolio to see, because, in any facility, it's not a single lease that we have. It is made up of 3 to 5 different leases within even a premises. So we do rationalize from time to time, 1 or 2 of those leases and move to some other space if need be. So these are minor adjustments. We have not given up any material space in last 3 months or so.
Should I read that along with, there was a statement which said that our offshore bench count has actually gone up in anticipation of the higher demands. But however, we see that your seat count is down about 2%. I mean, so do you expect that to come back very soon? And whether that will have an impact on your cost structure as well?
So Ashish, I think you are asking a very, very broad question, which industry is also grappling with currently, which is about this work from home versus return to office and when. And I think the seat count angle is relevant only when we return to office in full force. However, as we know very clearly that although percentages may vary from company to company, businesses to businesses, and client to client, it won't be 100% for anybody. So basically, our employee count, which will return to office, will not be 100%. And that's why there is no direct one-to-one correlation of headcount and seats left anymore, in my view.
Got it. And sir, I also noticed that your hiring, your head count has gone up dramatically sequentially. So do you expect the same pace to continue for the rest of the year? Will you throw some light on that?
PD, you want to take that?
Sure. Ashish, as I mentioned earlier, you should sort of attribute the increase in headcount to two things. One is, of course, staffing for demand, but the other is also, beefing up the bench a little bit. The latter factor, I would say, is more likely to be a one-time thing. And in fact, over the course of the year, if attrition tempers and reduces, we may again look to optimize our benches a little bit. And the former factor, which is about, sort of demand trends, that only time will tell. But, I would certainly say that Q1, we added a lot of headcount. I would be very, very surprised if, that same number was repeated over the future quarters. I would expect it to moderate somewhat.
Great. Just one last question from my side, if I may squeeze it in.
Sure, go ahead, Ashish. Last one.
Thanks. So your DSO has obviously come down and then it's inched up a bit in the last quarter. So where do you see that stabilizing over the next, say, 1 or 2 quarters or 3 quarters? You could throw some light on that. Thank you and all the best. That's all from my side.
Ashish, actually the DSOs have come down in last 2 quarters primarily because of Personiv integration. Personiv has a different collection cycle and credit terms agreed with their material clients, and they have slightly lesser DSOs than our native business, and that's why overall it came down. So basically for both the businesses, Personiv as well as eClerx excluding Personiv, the DSOs have remained almost similar in last 3 quarters or so. And we think, at least from the current visibility, that we should aim to remain here, barring, couple of days of variability here or there.
The next question comes from the line of Abhimanyu Ola. Abhimanyu, please go ahead.
My question is regarding the pricing in your top 10 clients. So for I believe that in the top 10 clients you help them decrease in their bottom line. So in case you guys stop having opportunities where you cannot increase their bottom line anymore, what happens in those cases?
Anjan, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think, look, ultimately prices get set to some extent by competition and also to what our clients' viable alternatives are. So as you can see, most of our clients have global footprints, especially the large customers. And across those global footprints, our clients are suffering right now from effectively supply shortages for people and talent. So they're all facing increasing in pricing everywhere. So we anticipate in at least the medium term for there not to be substantial pricing pressure on the work that we do. And instead for the focus to continue to be on volume reduction through automation and straight through processing, which is a journey that we, which is what I would argue we've been specializing on in our partnerships with clients. So in summary, I'd say our focus and our clients' focus continues to be on reducing volume of work versus pricing of work.
Okay, and I had another question. I don't know if you can you can make me understand how exactly does Personiv benefit from your clients? I believe that they have an advantage of getting clients in the financial market as you guys have more exposure in there.
So Abhimanyu, I think, it's more about trying to enable cross-sells across each other's portfolios. So as we've shared in prior calls, there are already a few situations where the sales teams in both companies have worked together on specific opportunities. So in that sense, I think they would certainly benefit from the inclusion in the eClerx group, because they not only have their native opportunities which they were chasing anyway, but they also have access to incremental new opportunities with some of our clients. So and in fact, one deal that we closed last quarter with one of the eClerx clients where Persona will be involved in the delivery. So there's a tangible benefit to them.
So eClerx has, prior to the acquisition, eClerx has worked with Persona before as well?
No.
Okay. And just if you could allow me for one last question, going forward, would you guys be looking for acquisition more in the KPO space, or you would be looking at other spaces as well? Because Persona seems to be coming from KPO space. And is your strategy more based on cross-selling? What exactly is your business strategy?
So Abhimanyu, I will leave the last part of question to PD. In terms of our approach to acquisition, we look for two kinds of situations, and we have done both in the past. One is, the acquisitions like CLX or Persona, where you acquire a company for its clients, its business, its relationship, and its people and its capability. And second is more tuck-in, which is basically to bulk up or maybe to address a specific client situation or to obtain a very, very niche capability in a small size. And we have done both of that. And Persona Group has also done previously one or two of those deals. So we continue to look for both these types of opportunities. And and just to correct your assumption that Persona is little more on the traditional BPO side, as opposed to what market understands from KPO, which is more on the analytics or things like that. So we continue to be open to spaces in digital, in traditional BPO, provided they service some niche client segment, which, for example, in case of Persona, it does target $500 million to 5 billion kind of SME client space as opposed to Fortune 500. So we are open to a broad spectrum, but tuck-ins and full acquisitions both are on the radar.
Okay.
Thank you, Abhimanyu. We'll take the next question from the line of VP Rajesh of Banyan Capital. VP, go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity. Rohitash, one question. From your comments, it seems like our organic revenue was almost flat. It's sort of the right conclusion sequentially.
No, both Persona and eClerx native revenues increased sequentially.
Okay, all right. And any color on CLX? How's that business coming back? Because I think last quarter it was a little soft, so I'm just trying to recollect if that was the case, and how was it in the June quarter?
PD?
Well, actually, I think CLX has been seeing good demand for their services in the aftermath of COVID. So from a very, very soft Q1 FY22 last year, which was sort of the low point for CLX, things have come back nicely, and both Q1 and Q4 have been reasonably strong for the business, both in terms of top line and margin. I think the luxury brands are seeing strong demand for their products, and they're moving to sort of faster marketing cycles, which means that there is more need for creative support and digital assets to support that strategy. And CLX is a beneficiary of that trend. So net, I would say last 6 months, have been fortunately quite good for CLX.
I see. Okay. Just a quick follow-up on that. Then, given the growth that we are showing sequentially, do you expect this to accelerate in the coming quarters, or do you think for the year we would be in a, let's say, mid-single digit kind of growth?
Well, I think that's hard to say. Certainly, I would say from a very near-term perspective, we have visibility to some ramps that are ongoing and some very late-stage discussions, which is why you also see the increase in the headcount that between Q4 and Q1. So I would say from a 3 to 6 month time frame, there is reasonably good visibility of incremental business that we expect to win. Beyond that, honestly, I can't answer your question in any kind of data-driven manner because our pipeline, whatever it is today, will either convert or die in that time frame. So the only real visibility we have at any point in time is 3 to 6 month visibility, and at least for that time horizon, things look good.
Okay, great. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, VP. We have the next question from the line of Sandeep Shah. There's a follow-on. Sandeep, I've unmuted you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just a question on the buyback. So I've been surprised that generally the tender offer buyback happens at a premium of 15 to 20% to CMP versus our indicating almost like a 47% premium to the CMP. So this actually reduces the optimality of the reduction in the equity share. So what is actually a basic purpose of such a huge premium on the tender offer? And what I understand, reading a press release, there would be a buyback committee. So if they don't approve this buyback price, then the price will revise downward or maybe higher based on the committee's recommendation.
So Rohitash, perhaps I can take that. Sandeep, I think our understanding of the SEBI rules is that the committee can only revise the price downwards, not upwards. So effectively, whatever price is announced today is a cap, and the final price at which the buyback tender will be conducted will be determined by the committee subsequently post SEBI approval, or rather post postal ballot, and that can only be revised downwards. If memory serves me correctly, the past 3 tender offers that we've done have also had, premiums of between 30 and 55% from the date of intimation of the board meeting. So the decision of the board today is in that range. I think the board was also cognizant that there's a fair amount of volatility, in the equity markets. So they wanted to, sort of keep a broad range with the intention of fixing a more fine price when the committee meets post the completion of the postal ballot. So I think if you look at our past 3 buybacks, you'll find that what has been decided today is not inconsistent with that.
Okay, fair enough. And just last 2 questions in terms of the roll-off. Last time we have said that FY21 was a good year with a lower roll-off, and you expect the same thing in FY22. So any change or status update on that? And second, can you give a color in terms of segment-wise demand in all the 3 segments of capital markets as well as digital operation and the cable and wireless? So that will help us.
Anjan, do you want to take both those questions, please?
Anjan, you need to unmute yourself, Anjan.
Yeah, I couldn't hear the first question. I heard the second question about by segment demand.
Yeah, so the first question which I asked is in terms of the comment on the roll-offs, which we said last time that FY21 the roll-offs were lower than earlier years, and that may be true even for FY22. So any change in status of that?
So I think this is related to the answer that I had given to the question that a gentleman had asked me earlier about financial markets in general, where I think part of the reason for the reduction in roll-offs is a reduction in supply or talent supply for our customers in general. So both onshore, because of government initiatives around furloughs and work from home and the sort of benefits that are being extended in Western markets, or let's say in developing markets or customer markets. And also the shortage of just supply in their production markets, which are both onshore and offshore. We're seeing less urgent transitions away from third party to their clients on captives, for example. Are you able to hear me? Did we lose somebody?
No, go on.
Okay.
Sure.
So there has, I think at the moment, just given supply and demand constraints, we anticipate that this sort of reduced roll-off period to probably extend for a little bit longer. But we do see it not as a permanent change, but possibly as a temporary change that's been extended. That's first. In terms of demand for the different sectors, I think it's actually more of the same. So in the financial market space, as I mentioned, that we had very stable market last year. I'd say given this supply shortages in onshore markets, we're seeing a demand from our banking clients to move work to third parties, perhaps a little bit more urgently than in the past. In our customer services business, we continue to see demand for work. And I think, again, a lot of that is coming from the fact that they're finding it hard to staff their onshore sites. So work is coming to us both onshore and offshore, because in many instances, providing these services onshore is almost cost uncompetitive for both third parties and our clients. And on the digital side, I'd say that demand is unabated because our clients continue to be very focused on client first, direct to customer, and sort of removing layers of people and looking at automation for the way they run their marketing campaigns. So I'd say that there has been less change on that front, but generally it's a more supportive environment for third-party vendors like us, given supply constraints.
Thank you, Sandeep. Next question is from the line of Ruchi Burde. Ruchi, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. In recent few quarters, the offshore mix of the business has been trending up. So now, do you see this trend of higher offshore delivery getting intensified when you look at your deals in pipeline or the new deal wins that has happened?
Let me take that question because I think it's actually a follow-on from the previous question. We anticipate that there will be more demand for offshore, again in the medium term, simply because we think in our local client markets, there is a supply shortage of talent. So our clients are finding it harder and harder at the moment, given all the constraints, to get work done in the local market. So I think overall demand for doing things offshore is increasing. And secondly, I think to the point that PD had made in one of the previous calls, there is much more comfort around what I would call virtual work, given that over the last 18 months, a lot of our buyers and decision makers have seen work being done completely virtually. So even people who in the past would not have considered doing work from third-party countries are much more comfortable with that decision now than they were 18 months ago. So I think both those factors are major contributors to a general increase in offshore demand.
Thank you.
Ruchi, you have any other questions?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchi. We have a follow-on question from the line of Hitesh Arora. Hitesh, go ahead.
Yes. So, I'm not looking for a specific guidance, but given the strong momentum, in the business, as you said, and general shortage of sourcing talent in-house, the good traction that you see, can we expect a better than a 1.4% sequential growth, at least say for the next 2 quarters? What is the moment, given the momentum that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think, Hitesh, I mean, if you look at it, we've added a large chunk of headcount in Q1, and we would hope to monetize a reasonable proportion of that incremental, ads. So we'll always see volatility in our quarter-on-quarter outcomes, but if you take an average of the last 3-4 quarters, probably the most recent average is in excess of that 1.6% that we reported this quarter. It's probably the softest of the last 3-4 quarters. So keeping that in mind, I would say yes. I don't have an exact number, but we would be disappointed if our next couple of quarters, stayed averaging at 1.6%. Let me put it this way.
Fair enough. Okay, that's all from my side.
Thank you, Hitesh. I'll take the next question from the line of Debashish Mazumdar. Debashish, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for the opportunity. I have only one question. If I see the attrition, it has come down from 36 to 32%, which is heartening to see. The question that I have in my mind is, should we assume for our modeling purpose that we have reached to a peak attrition level of 36% last quarter, and it is expected to trending down from here on?
So Debashish, I think you have to look at a little longer term history. And we have seen several consecutive quarters of 40% plus attrition also. Obviously, that is before COVID happened. And, things are a little uncertain at this point of time, given the whole COVID wave 1, wave 2, and God forbid, COVID wave 3, where people, across the industry, about 25 to 30% people are working truly remotely, meaning not from their base station. And if, a future situation when COVID is finally done and dusted, if, a majority of them have to be in office, I think the industry will see probably a different dynamic of attrition. So things are very, very uncertain at this point of time. But I would say, last 2 quarters are fair representation of what the current work from home situation for attrition looks like. And last point I would make is that just like you are seeing in eClerx last 3 quarters were strong, all the other IT companies and BPO companies where we get talent and where we, where talent get attracted to also, are also seeing very, very good demand. So basically, if attrition increases from here on, within the current situation, I won't be surprised. And we are well prepared for that. As PD was mentioning, we have beefed up a little bit on the bench side, given the attrition dynamic.
And I think to Hitash's point, I think we should assume that in a business like ours, that high demand from our client side goes hand in hand with high demand for the supply side, which is our people. So in a market which is generally constructive for the business, you would expect higher attrition on the whole.
So effectively, we should say like this way, higher attrition is directing towards higher demand. That is what we are taking. And one last question, qualitatively, can you help me to get some sense that among the large hiring that we had done this year, what could be the percentages for the attrition makeup and what could be the percentage for the growth?
PD?
Yeah, I think we don't want to get into such specific breakups of the numbers, Debashish, because if we make disclosures, then we like to make sure we continue making those disclosures.
Sure.
So that's a little bit too granular.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debashish. I'll now take a question from the line of Ashish Agarwal. Ashish, go ahead.
Thanks, Diwakar. Most of my questions have been answered, but just wanted to understand, was growth in this quarter impacted by COVID in the sense that you were not able to service demand because employees were on leave, etc.? There was some impact of that also in this quarter?
PD?
Not really, Ashish. I think, to be very, very honest, the negative impact of COVID for us was largely in Q1 FY21, both on the demand and the supply side. Thereafter, if anything, I would say COVID has been a little bit of a tailwind for our business because, to Anjan's remarks earlier, they have made clients more open to considering distributed supply models, which obviously favors companies like us that are based offshore. So from that perspective, if anything, we benefited from a little bit of tailwinds in this pandemic environment.
Got it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ashish. We'll take a follow-on question from the line of Abhimanyu Ola. Abhimanyu, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that I was going through the past con call and there it was, I noticed that we had an impact of about $200 million number, $200 million. So are we talking about this as the gross revenue of past 3-4 years, or is this coming from like 2-3 clients as a cumulative number?
Abhimanyu, can you please repeat what did you say? $200 million. What?
Yeah. So in the last I think Q1 con call you had given guidance that due to the loss in 2-3 clients we had an impact of about 200 million number as in revenue terms. So when you say the 200 million revenue impact, did you mean by in the last 3-4 years that was the cumulative impact, or was this in particular year that we had the impact?
No, I think the only, if my recollection is correct, that the only similar question we had was how much of large roll-offs we have seen in last 3-4 years when our overall revenue remained flat. And I think the answer to that was not probably 200, but it is much smaller number on annualized basis. And these events happened at different points of time over those 4 years. PD, you want to add that? I'm assuming this is the question.
No, I think that's fine, Rohit. You've covered it. Thanks.
Okay, and if you could guide me on the your strategy ahead, I believe you were going to answer that question, but you could not.
Yeah, PD, I think this is a question about M&A strategy, if I recollect.
Yes.
Okay.
I think M&A is the art of the possible. So it's I think from our side, we have a very open mind to considering a broader spectrum of assets that may potentially fit with our business. But our experience has been that, a number of stars have to align for a transaction to actually fructify. But we keep looking at all the opportunities that come our way. And if we find the right asset where we think there's a good business fit, there's a good culture fit, the numbers make sense, we'll do it. But, I guess it's a function also of the deal flow that we see.
Okay, and if you could allow me just one last question. So in the case where we lost the revenue from the 2-3 clients due to the corporate actions, why did we not have a chance to collaborate with those companies at this point of time? I believe in the past that we could not collaborate because they were not looking to have work automated or not have offshore work. But are those clients looking to get that kind of work right now at this point?
Anjan, you want to take it?
Yeah, I guess to the point that Rohitash is making, our large client roll-offs probably happened a couple of years back. So in the recent past, we certainly haven't had what I would call large client roll-offs that have had a meaningful impact on our business, first of all. Secondly, the couple of large roll-offs that happened sort of the period 2017 to 2018, we continue to be in conversations with many of those clients. Some of them obviously made other decisions into which they are invested. So they set up facilities in the local markets, or they moved to different geographies, or they moved into the captive sites. So whilst we continue to be in discussions, it's difficult to make those clients uninvest from the decisions that they have made. But we continue, obviously, to be in discussions with those clients. In many instances, it's easier to find new clients who are in the right mode of their buy cycle than it is to go back to old customers and get them to reverse their decisions. So I'd say yes, our conversations continue. We obviously learn from the mistakes of the past to the extent that we feel we made mistakes, and we're using them to make sure that the future looks better.
Next question comes from the line of, it's a follow-on from the line of Manik Taneja. Manik, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. PD, just wanted to prod you a little bit with regards to the employee addition that we've seen in the current quarter. We added about 900 plus people in the current quarter, and you said there is some element of bench build out that you've done because of probably some fear around attrition, etc., and some for ramp up or growth that we see in the pipeline. If you could give us some sense of what would be the mix from that standpoint, and do you also see attrition becoming a worry for you, just like it is for IT services? Because I thought it would not be the case.
So Manik, thank you for your question. The first one, it's hard for me to break that out because it's akin to effectively, giving a guidance in another fashion for what we see in terms of revenue outcomes. But on your second question, I would say, look, I think to some degree our bench had gotten depleted over the last couple of quarters because we saw, at least by our standards, stronger growth than what we might have anticipated at about 5-6% sequentially. So that led to a drawdown in our bench, and some of the hiring that we've done is to A, normalize the bench, and B, build a little bit of a buffer there. Worry from an attrition perspective, I think it comes down to, who's leaving the firm, because I think if we are losing what I would call broad talent, then it's much easier for us to replenish with new hires after giving them the appropriate training. If we start losing subject matter experts or people with niche and domain skills, then it's much more difficult for us to fill those gaps. For this, as of this point, I wouldn't say it's become a worry for us because the attrition has been pretty broadly spread across different skills as it has been in the past. It's not like it's focused in one area that would create a lot of pain for the firm. So I wouldn't say it's a worry, but I think we've just taken some actions to give us a little bit more resilience.
Sure. And one just quick checkup. So in the recent past, you've suggested of much stronger near-term visibility in financial services and customer operations part of our business. Does that hold true for from a go-forward standpoint as well?
Yeah, so Manik, I think we addressed this a few different ways in a few questions today. But broadly speaking, I think our different businesses tend to rotate growth leadership from time to time. So if I look back at FY21, probably our digital business had very strong traction in the aftermath of COVID, and some of our other businesses were more flattish over that period. As of now, in our pipeline, market seems to have a pretty strong pipeline. So I would say that rotation keeps happening, but over a let's say 2-year time frame, FY21 and FY22, I think all three of our businesses hopefully should be strongly up over where they were in FY20.
Thank you for the opportunity and all the best.
Thanks, Manik.
We have a follow-on question from the line of Sandeep Shah. Sandeep, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for giving me again an opportunity. Just PD, this is a more strategic question. So if I look at your business development team strength, it has been moving up gradually, maybe because of personnel as well. But why not go slightly more aggressive, invest and building a higher team, which helps you to build a new business TCV consistently higher than the roll-ups which we see. So that may bring a medium to longer term growth sustainability as a whole, rather than having a predictability for 3 to 6 months. So any view on that too?
I'll defer that to Anjan. I think he may be able to give a better answer than I might.
Thanks, PD. Well, look, we've gone back and forth in this strategy over many years, and we are of the view that ultimately this business and growth is not about throwing dollars at salespeople and at a client development team. Obviously, you need them, but I think it's the horse before the cart problem, which is that ultimately we need to make sure that stuff that we sell is well defined, well productized, easy to understand, so that when you throw dollars at it, they automatically gain traction. And I think if you look at the success that we've had over the last 3 years, that success is in spite of the fact that we haven't really invested that many more new dollars towards sales. It's come from the fact that we think our product sets are much better defined. It's a function of focus. So, we want to continue to make those investments go hand in hand. Now, when you look at the dollars that we invest in what we define as productized services, they don't necessarily show up in biz dev or onshore headcount, so they won't show up in P&L. But they're in there, they're in subject matter, they are part of our operations team. So our view is that, we want to continue to super invest in defining product and then add sales capabilities selectively. We think that the shotgun approach of just hiring sales capability is not very investment accretive, especially for a company of our size.
Thanks. And just last question, Rohitas, the impact which can come through earn-out for Personal in September 21 and March 22, will it be material, or do you believe it may not be that big to call out and maybe a headwind to a market?
So Sandeep, that's difficult to say. That's what this exercise will be in future, to assess what are the future projections like, because earnouts are still some time away. So we have to project what those earnouts will be 1 year or 2 year out. And we will do that assessment in September and then March. And then we will see if, the amounts are material as per the accounting standard.
So this is September 21 and March 22, right?
Yeah, and also following September also. So earnouts are for 2 years from the deal date. So it will happen for next maybe 3 semesters. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. All the best.
Thank you.
That was the last question for the day. Now the conference back to PD for his closing comments. PD?
Yeah. Thank you everyone for taking the time and joining our call today, and we look forward to speaking with you next quarter. Thank you.
Thank you everyone, and have a nice weekend. Bye.